Design.
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 Design means to plan.
Human.
Substance.
Technology.
Designing for a better future.
What is design really?
Let's talk about design.
Making an impact in the world.
The power of design to improve life.
Design to survive.
Fashion involves everyone. Each garment we pluck off the rack, whether it's a last season t-shirt from the bargain bin or a pair of shiny designer pumps, every choice we make has an impact. Over centuries, fashion has evolved from functional garments to a playful element of self-expression. And today, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, offering us every clothing option from top to toe that we could possibly imagine or desire.
That's hot.
But we all know the industry is deadly. And even with the most sustainable materials, ethical production methods, and circular systems, brand success is still defined by sales. The world now consumes about 80 billion new pieces of clothing every year. This is 400% more than the amount we consumed just 2 decades ago. Yet it's estimated that we wear only 20 to 30% of the clothing in our wardrobes.
We want the feeling of luxury without paying full price. We want to look expensive-ish. Right? We've all been to H&M and been like, dress shirt for $8? Cool. I just gotta look decent at this wedding. But just like Cinderella, everything dissolves by midnight.
As more aspects of our daily lives migrate online, the way we present and express ourselves creatively has dramatically changed and continues to do so exponentially. Every day, we carefully craft and maintain our digital profiles to showcase our very best professional and private selves. Our online identities are becoming the most important ways we interact with society, and many believe eventually will only exist virtually.
I do think digital fashion could be an answer to how fast fashion impacts the environment, because for people who just want to be seen wearing loads of different clothes in pictures, they're not actually buying new clothes every week.
As more and more industries are evolving to meet this envisioned future, designers are also seeing this as an opportunity to tackle the problems of the physical fashion world. Today, we can visually tailor almost every part of our online existence. So why not make it possible to dress ourselves digitally? The most sustainable garment is surely one that doesn't physically exist, and the possibilities would be endless. So why not fake fashion for the sake of the planet? Welcome to Can Design Save Us, a series exploring design as a pioneering force for good. We dive into the most pressing problems of our time and meet people using design to solve them. We explore the good, bad, complex, and controversial. My name is Lesley Price, host from the Index Project, and my guest today is Michaela Larosse, Head of Content and Strategy at the Fabricant, a digital fashion house leading the fashion industry towards a new sector of digital-only clothing. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to the interview today.
Absolutely, my pleasure to be here.
So my first question, when we talk about the concept of digital fashion, it is very difficult for people to sort of wrap their heads around it. As you've mentioned, how do you make something that doesn't physically exist, particularly in the fashion world? So what is the Fabricant all about? So how do you pitch it when you meet someone for the first time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because as we've discussed before, it's this mindset shift that's required to think of your clothing as non-physical, which I appreciate for people who aren't familiar with digital fashion. It's a little bit of a leap. I think people are used to thinking of other creative industries as digital. So there's film and music and photography, and they had these very long established digital cultures, but fashion didn't. Mm-hmm. So the Fabricant, when it was devised, I guess the R&D phase for the Fabricant happened as early as 2015, but it was established finally in 2018. And then the concept of non-physical fashion just didn't exist for the industry. But it's interesting to see there's a sort of general ecosystem of people working in the film and digital world, mm-hmm. who realized that fashion had to digitize. So when we're talking to the general consumer about what digital fashion is, you have to get them to think of fashion as an experience rather than this sort of very intimate physical thing that we're used to, where you're wearing clothing, it's protecting your body, it's how you express yourself physically. You can have that similar expression, but in the digital world. So the feeling that you get from wearing a garment doesn't require physicality. You don't need physicality to experience emotions. So that same emotion that you get from seeing yourself in a physical garment, you can experience in the digital world when you wear digital fashion, because suddenly you'll be, either yourself can be dressed, a picture like a very literal photograph of you, or your avatar, which is a digital depiction of you, which could be anything. We could all choose to be anything we want to be in the digital world, because of course there are no physical limitations. And when you see yourself digitally dressed, and the Fabricant pieces are known as digital couture, so they're quite spectacular and very beautiful, you get that same rush of emotion, you get that same feeling that you get from wearing a physical piece. But I appreciate when you start the initial conversation, people comprehend this, and they go, oh, right, yeah. And when you put it in terms of things that they're familiar with, of course, other things like music, which used to be difficult. I recall when music first became digital, and it was a leap for people then, like, what do you mean you don't have a piece of vinyl and you play it, or whatever, CDs or whatever it was.
Yeah, 1,000 songs on the iPod, wasn't it? I think it was one of the first, yeah.
And it was this extraordinary kind of mental leap that you had to make from something being very physical, a record collection or your CD collection or whatever, taking up all this physical space. And then you had to transition to thinking of it as something that just didn't require that. And it's exactly that same journey that's required for digital fashion.
No, and I think it's a great analogy, especially when you use that it's much easier for then people to sort of wrap their heads around it and sort of see it as something that's not super far-fetched, but something that will be, I guess, common potentially in the next couple of years. So how did you come to join the Fabricant? I thought it was quite an interesting story. You sort of likened it to, was it like a Tinder, but for employment, right?
for business networking,
yes,
yeah.
That's right.
So when I came to Amsterdam in 2018, I was looking around at interesting, I've always worked in media, by the way. My background is as a conceptual creative for advertising agencies. So I've always worked as an ideas person. That's literally been my job. Think of ideas for brands and execute them creatively. I also have a journalism background. So when I came to Amsterdam, I was looking into just the general media environment and seeing what opportunities there were and what was interesting. And both myself and Karlie, the founder, one of the founders of the Fabricant, were using this app called Shaper, which I'm not sure if it still exists, but it was around at the time. And it matched you in terms of interests and business capabilities with similar people. And it was literally like a swipe left, swipe right thing, kind of classic dating app thing, but for business networking. And Karlie appeared on my page, and I was like, this is interesting. I've got absolutely no idea what he's talking about. So I was obviously really intrigued. And at that moment, he had just founded the Fabricant with Amber, who is the creative director of the Fabricant. And I went to meet him. We just had this very chill coffee on the side of a canal. 2018 was an insanely hot summer, so we sat outside. And he just told me about the idea behind the Fabricant, about the possibilities for digital fashion, about this idea of it being the last creative industry, as we've just said, to digitize. Yeah. And it was an absolute, of course, moment for me. He didn't really need to explain it to me anymore, because as a person who's always worked with big ideas, it was just a no-brainer. It was like, absolutely, this has to happen. And Karlie's background is in the film and visual effects industry.
Okay,
Amber's a classically trained fashion designer who's transitioned all of her skills into the digital world. In fact, she was the first person ever to graduate with a purely digital collection from her fashion school, which was a fight that she had to have at the time, because again, the idea that you would create something non-physical as your final collection was outrageous.
Right.
And interestingly, they both had this passion about what fashion could be when it was non-physical, and they were both in Amsterdam and they found each other. So yeah, as soon as I heard this, it was like, I'm in. What do you need me to do?
Yeah.
I'm completely here for this. Yeah, so it was really cool.
No, I mean, it sounds like a perfect fusion of skills there.
Serendipity, really serendipity.
Yeah. But when we talk about the kinds of applications you guys work with, of course, many people would assume with digital fashion that it is pretty much at the end of a product's life cycle, that we're sort of only creating these garments for display or for shows or something like that. But you guys sort of work along the life cycle of the product. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So just to give listeners some idea of how the Fabricant works, there's two sides to our business. There's the pure digital couture house, where we create Fabricant label non-physical fashion. So all those garments are entirely digital. They will never be physical, and they're purely for use in the digital realm. The other side of our business is where we work with existing physical fashion brands and help them use kind of disruptive 3D practices to bring them into the digital fashion space, usually for sustainability reasons, actually, because we can really disrupt parts of their production cycle, particularly around sampling and marketing, where you don't need to travel or send fabric across the planet, which you do with samples usually, and have this very labor-intensive process. So when you come across a piece of digital couture, like purely our garments that we create purely for the digital space, you would interact with those in digital environments like gaming. Gaming's a very good reference point for people to think about digital fashion. Because
skins, as they call them, right?
Exactly. So the idea of gaming skins and dressing your in-game character in some kind of garment is very well established, but people don't necessarily think of that as digital fashion. It's got a very established culture, which, as you say, is called skins. So there's a slight shift even for gamers to start thinking of that application as fashion. It's more like, I guess, familiar as dressing up a character. It's a slightly different take on the same thing. And then when we work with brands, we will, really intervene in the classic fashion production cycle, particularly around sampling. When you do 3D interventions, we can completely recreate their patterns in 3D, stitch together the garments. Again, I'm talking about digital stitching here. Digitally stitch together the garments and entirely create the garment in 3D. So you have this 3-dimensional garment that can then be used as a file across multiple applications. So frequently, the Fabricant finish is super high-end. It's sort of movie-level finish. So obviously, the obvious application for brands is to use our garments as a marketing piece. So there'll be lots of brands that we've worked with where you'll be looking at these garments that are actually flawless recreations of their physical garments, but 3D. But to the average person, they wouldn't realize when they were looking at the website that they weren't looking at an actual physical garment.
Real thing.
They're looking at a sort of flawless 3D recreation. And the beauty of that then is they have a 3D file for future reference. So if, for example, like an activewear brand, they will frequently iterate new collections, and they don't necessarily change their design, but they'll change colorways and patterns. They can use exactly the same file, completely iterate new collections with new kind of fabrics and textures at a click. So they don't need to go through this massive carbon-heavy physical process over and over again.
Making all the prototypes, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, samples. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So it's those kind of two different aspects of the industry that we generally work with.
I think you mentioned last time that there's actually been studies on this. Was it by the Royal College of Art that you guys have worked with? That is it 30% saving on the current carbon imprint, I think you said? Yeah,
it's Imperial College London, which is an amazing institution. They were observing our work because they do a lot of scientific studies. And one of their graduates did this very super data research heavy insight into the full life cycle of a garment. So from the moment, a physical garment versus a digital garment. So from the moment the cotton is grown, so she used a t-shirt as an example, just the life cycle of a t-shirt. I guess because it's this ubiquitous item that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, the plain white tee.
Exactly. So the moment that the cotton is grown and all the water required to water that crop, through the entire production and manufacturing cycle in factories and delivery and shipping and planes, and then just getting it to the consumer's door, or the amount of lighting required for a store display, for example, through to how the consumer uses it, how many times they're likely to launder it, and what impact that has on the planet, to the moment of disposal, where potentially it goes in landfill. So there's this huge life cycle of a typical physical garment. And then there was a like for like, exactly the same life cycle for a digital garment. Obviously, digital garments don't exist. So this comparison is kind of exceptional in that the carbon saving in that kind of iteration is 97% in terms of the carbon reduction of the impact of a purely physical garment. The processes that we're talking about here, when we interact with a brand, that is going to be a much smaller carbon impact because the part of their production cycle that we're disrupting is purely in the sampling phase and the marketing phase, because obviously they still need to create the garment, etc., and all those things that happen with the consumer still happen. But for brands to begin to iterate 3D sampling, the savings, again, for those two processes are up to 30%. Obviously, there's nuance and detail in all of these studies. You can't just sort of say this is a blanket number that works for everybody, because as we know, all brands operate slightly differently and choose different methodologies. But the maximum for those two processes, sampling and marketing, is up to 30% in terms of carbon impact on the planet, which is still huge if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just mentioned a couple of brands there the brands that you sort of work with. Are there any sort of standout projects that you can share with us? Where you guys have co-created to make something very special?
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of on both sides of the coin of what we do. A project that we absolutely loved recently was a project that we did with Adidas and Karlie Kloss, supermodel Karlie Kloss. Karlie is very invested in getting young women into tech and STEM subjects, which is science, tech, engineering, and mathematics, if everybody's not familiar with that acronym.
Yes.
And she runs her own organization, non-profit organization, running coding camps for young women to get more women into tech, because as we know, tech is notorious for its gender imbalance. There are all kinds of reasons for that. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy that young women aren't seeing any role models in tech, therefore they don't enter tech, and therefore they choose not to study tech. So we just really needed to sort of disrupt this narrative that young women shouldn't be in tech. So Karlie actually herself approached the Fabricant because she was familiar with our work through this particular interest of hers.
That must have been an exciting day. Not every day you get an email from Karlie Kloss, right?
Exactly, and she's very engaged in the topic and very savvy. Karlie was already iterating an activewear collection, like a capsule collection with Adidas. She's also like super fit. I guess that goes with the territory of being a supermodel. I don't know.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So she was creating a physical collection with Adidas. And she wanted to bring some of this kind of tech savvy into this collection in some way to really talk about the other parts of the world that she's interested in beyond, I guess, fashion. And so she came to the Fabricant and asked us, what can we do? We really, really love what you do. How can we kind of bring a digital fashion component into this collection and talk about, the problematic nature of women in tech? So with Karlie and Adidas, we came up with this competition called Making Strides, which was all about getting young women into tech and really showing young women that there was a new route into tech via the very youthful industry of digital fashion, which most people aren't aware of, and certainly young women of graduate age weren't aware of. So for this, we took one of these physical garments, a key piece, a jacket from the physical collection.
Mm-hmm.
The Fabricant completely iterated that jacket in 3D, created a 3D pattern of the jacket. And then this is something that we do constantly with our own work, by the way.
How do you guys do that exactly? Sorry, I'm sort of going off on a tangent
please
here.
Ask.
Do you scan it, or how does it work?
The team will measure and draw it in 3D. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
I'm not a tech person,
manual
so
in
I
that
can't,
sense.
I
Yeah.
can't really give
No,
you...
that's fine. I think we don't need the full tech details, because I think it would be over most people's heads anyway.
Oh, it's over my heads frequently.
Yeah. But carry on. I was just interested to see if they photograph it off the. Yeah, it makes sense if they measure it and then they just sketch it out.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes frequently there will be like a digital aspect to the file, but I guess like a much more 2D version of the file that the brands will send digitally. I don't know how this played out for Adidas, by the way, so that this might be slight misinformation in terms of what exactly happened with Adidas.
No, and I can imagine they're probably pretty careful with what they're sort of distributing.
But generally speaking, that is how we will iterate, and we have to completely build the pan exactly like for like in 3D.
Yeah, makes sense.
So then the pattern existed as a 3D digital file, which we gave away on our website to the world's 3D creators and said, here's this cool piece from Karlie's collection. Show us what you can do. Show us your iteration of this jacket. And it was just phenomenal. We got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of iterations of this jacket, which began in its original incarnation as this sort of very stylish orange kind of piece of activewear. And our sort of global creators kind of just went wild with it. And the cool thing about it was there were loads of people who had never tried to iterate in 3D before, just had a go.
Wow, okay.
And just sent stuff to us. So we had to do this epic judging process. But it was very, very cool. And we whittled that down to 20 finalists and then 3 final winners. The 20 finalists, we uploaded all of their garments onto blockchain and auctioned them on their behalf. But they stand now as a gallery of iterations of what you can do in 3D with one file. And everybody can kind of bring their own unique visual aesthetic to one 3D file. So it's a really fun example.
No, I mean, that's brilliant. I think to just have that open source process where you just sort of scour the world for this creativity, it sounds really, really exciting. But you also mentioned blockchain there, and I think that you talked about that it is quite fundamental to the way you guys do business. Sort of, how do you use it?
Yeah, so blockchain, for maybe if people aren't familiar, it's obviously a system whereby you can upload any kind of digital item and give them provenance, because once it exists on blockchain, it's this global ledger that details every transaction that ever happens with a digital item, be that you can sell houses on the blockchain and have this kind of provenance and visibility. It's very much about transparency and visibility to kind of I guess, iterate our world in a new way and remove these kind of historic gatekeepers and having to go to different...
The middlemen of banks, etc.
Exactly. All these institutions, we have the tech to do things differently. How that plays out for the Fabricant, of course, is our garments are one-off iterations frequently, particularly if they're from our couture house. When we upload to blockchain from the Fabricant's account, it's clearly... there's an understanding that this is a Fabricant original. So it creates that provenance and storytelling for the garment. And you can see every single time it's transacted on a digital marketplace. Any garment, there's a huge market in digital art at the moment. And not the digital fashion market is very nascent. It's happening right now. There's various players creating digital garments which are being exchanged and collected on the blockchain. But for our garments in particular, when they get uploaded to blockchain, if you're not going to use it practically to dress your avatar, it becomes this visual cryptocurrency, which you can collect and trade and sell whatever you wish to do, but it's a different way of iterating a cryptocurrency, essentially. And there are people that collect our garments.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to hear that, actually.
Yeah, it's really cool. Much like, I guess,
not that, I mean, I'm sure the garments are really, really desirable. I'm just quite surprised that there are individuals out there who are already wanting to collect these items.
Yeah, it's digital collectibles is a massive market, and it comes in all kinds of forms. I guess, like, if you're familiar with like CryptoPunks, these digital collectibles. These were very early iterations of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is essentially a digital collectible. There's a huge collectors world out there. So much like in the physical world, sneakerheads go to these fashion drops for a limited edition pair of sneakers, and then they keep them pristine in a box and sometimes trade them. It's a very collector's mindset, and that collector's mindset is just about having a beautiful, rare item that they can covet and own, I guess, for kudos reasons. Ultimately, at some point, we may get to see what our garments are worth on the secondary market. We don't quite know right now.
Yeah, a bit early, but it's exciting to see what's going to happen, though.
Yeah, but those collectors are out there, particularly people, I guess, deeply involved in the crypto world, who really value digital art and are really committed to building, as we said, this new world, this new way of doing business, and this new way of thinking about creativity.
I mean, I think it's also really nice that when you talk about that you can sort of retain that specialness of a digital item, because I think for many of us, once we think something is on the internet, you assume there are just duplicates and duplicates and duplicates. So I think it's really brilliant that you guys can sort of use blockchain to preserve that. Exclusivity is probably the wrong word.
Yeah, I guess it's authenticity.
Yes, that's a better word
is the
for
word. It's just, this is an authentic item. It was created by us. It was uploaded by us, and here's the digital trail that tells you that it was us. So, like with any item that's created by maybe a specialist of any kind, you want that authenticity. You want the provenance. Any physical, I guess, antique or whatever, or piece of vintage, it is only worth something because of the provenance, because of the history behind the item. So it's that translated to the digital world.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you recall the first time that you tried on a digital garment? I'm just intrigued to hear about what sort of your response was or how it made you feel.
It was really fun, actually. It was one of our filter iterations. So there's a constant quest for us right now to give utility to our garments, which means just usability. How can you use digital fashion? Because the simple iteration of the tech kind of needs us to catch up with us. And the easiest way that you can wear one of our items right now, and we put these on our Instagram, is by using a filter, which everybody's familiar with from Snapchat.
Yeah.
So I tried on one of the headpieces from our Reveal collection, which it was fairly, to say I've been working for the Fabricant like 3 years now. This was a very recent moment. And it was one of our headpieces. And it's just really fun, it's more like excitement. And there's this comedy, I think we talked about it before, was this comedy moment where you're staring into your phone, trying on a filter, and obviously on your phone screen, there's a reflection of you wearing this very quite spectacular avant-garde headpiece, is what I could see on my screen, but the person sitting next to you can only just see you doing this
your
absurd
face.
Kind of comedy
You'll
poses.
be doing your mirror face. That's why everyone's got one, right?
Exactly, your mirror / influencer face.
Yes, yeah. a lot of pouting, I imagine.
Exactly. So, it's exactly I guess it's exactly that moment that we talked about that you probably have when you're in a changing room in the physical world, trying on a garment and trying to get your best angles and thinking, God, I look hot in this, or this looks terrible on me, or whatever, or this is really fun or cool. It's that moment, but digital. Yeah. So it was really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good sort of course, it's not exactly the same, but a way to convince people, okay, so we're sort of using these filters all the time. So, how far off is digital fashion in general? We pay for filters and all that kind of stuff. So, I can imagine it helps a little bit to sort of see, okay, yeah, is this super far-fetched if we're doing this pretty much on a daily basis already?
Yeah, there's two potential iterations. One which is very possible right now, which maybe, I guess, people in the celebrity world are able to access more than your average person. And that would be creating your own personal avatar. So a 3D iteration of you that roams around digitally. I don't know if everybody saw the Fortnite gig by Travis Scott last year.
That's a good example, yeah.
It was phenomenal. It was just, in terms of digital craft, was mind-blowing. An incredible 9-minute gig that a digital version of Travis Scott, a gigantic digital version of Travis Scott, that is, he was like, I don't know, at least 300 foot tall, roaming around this metaverse, which is the Fortnite game that we know. And that 9-minute gig was watched by 12 million players within the Fortnite environment. Obviously, we're not all in the Travis Scott echelons of celebrity.
No. Not yet, anyway.
But it is possible to iterate yourself in 3D and have a 3D avatar. And then obviously the wearing of a digital garment on your avatar becomes very simple because your garment's 3D and you're 3D. The other way to iterate is via a filter. So it's as we are now, I know people are hearing this and not seeing it, but we could both see each other on the screen. And that would be like any filter iteration. The technology tracks the garment onto your body, and you appear to be wearing the garment. Right now, in terms of a full body execution for a filter, for the Fabricant garments, because as we said, that there's sort of super high level finish, the tech's not quite there. It's not quite flawless. I think everybody's familiar with this moment where you're trying on a filter and you move your head around a bit and it doesn't quite track perfectly.
Yeah.
To be able to really, I guess, fully iterate the idea of digital fashion, you need that flawless tracking. You need to be sitting in a Zoom meeting and at a click be able to change the garment you're wearing digitally that's suitable to the moment that you're in. At least the
top, right? Yeah.
At least the top. But the idea that you could stand up in the meeting and do a 360 twirl and the garment flow around your body like a physical garment is, the perfect case scenario that we'd like. There's lots of
So you could wear your pajamas and then you just have this beautifully projected gown on you if you like.
Exactly. We could all be in our gym jams living comfortable lives, but be digitally dressed in spectacular couture and no one would ever know.
Yeah.
So to be able to iterate that at a click will be coming very soon. I do think people like Snapchat are probably on the case with this already, and making that work. So I think in terms of what we'll be able to, I guess, the full acceleration of digital fashion, when that possibility comes to the wider public, that you can easily change garments and it looks great and it's absolutely flawless, I guess is what will really bring digital fashion to wider attention and usability for the average person.
And is sort of that the end goal for you guys, that eventually, because often we hear a lot of people talking about that we will exist even more so in the virtual world. Some say completely exclusively, but I mean, is that sort of the end goal for the Fabricant? To be dressing every avatar out there?
Yeah, well, it's one step beyond that, I guess. So we mentioned this word metaverse. This is the next iteration of the internet that's being created right now, the immersive internet. People like Fortnite. There's currently lots of competing metaverses. Platforms like Decentraland, which is a digital marketplace, is a metaverse, which means you can step inside this world. You can iterate an avatar and roam around digital galleries, look at things, look at spaces. These exist right now. There's a bit of a race to create the ultimate metaverse. Potentially it will be Epic Games, who are the creators of Fortnite, because obviously they're quite far down the idea of creating a fully realized digital world. The Fabricant intends to become the wardrobe for the metaverse.
Yep.
So when we all have a digital twin, which, believe it or not, we all will have, we will have a digital self that will attend meetings on our behalf, conduct transactions, have experiences in the metaverse. All of those things you would need to be dressed for. So our goal is to create the wardrobe for the metaverse.
Well, I mean, that's a tremendous goal and I mean, incredibly exciting. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the productivity, right? Having a second you, a second way more stylish you, I guess.
A way more stylish you wearing whatever you choose to wear in the metaverse, where there's absolutely no physical boundaries, not gravity, not anything, where you can iterate however you wish, change bodies, change identities. It'll be very interesting to see what people choose and which way people go with this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Your immediate thing is, well, I need to iterate a literal version of myself, and you really don't. You can have silver skin and gills if you really want to.
True. I mean, the possibilities are endless, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a limitless space. So that world isn't quite there yet, but that's where we're going. And you will all need to be digitally dressed, and the Fabricant intends to do that for you.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Very exciting stuff. But what are you guys working on at the moment, or sort of what's the next milestone, if you can share that with us? You just dropped a new digital collection, right, that sold out very quickly. We did.
Yes. We've been moving at such warp speed this year in the fashion house part of the business. I'm actually having to mentally scroll back. You actually remembered easier than me what we've just been doing. So we just dropped a collection with Pablo Vittar, who is this amazing artist from Brazil, if people aren't familiar with. And they are huge in Brazil, like next level famous. They're a pop star, singer-songwriter and drag artist with this amazing aesthetic. So we collaborated with Pablo and Nico Panda, which is a brand owned by Nicola Formichetti, who's this amazing fashion creator and creative director who usually works with Lady Gaga. Mm-hmm. So we created some pieces for Pablo, which were dropped as NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And they sold out instantly because obviously there's a lot of love for Pablo out there. And that was two really actually fun garments. They were designed by Nicola initially as sketches. Mm-hmm. And then the Fabricant reinterpreted, for the 3D space to make them very 3D and sort of add those fantastical elements. And that was a really fun iteration, I have to say, because Pablo's aesthetic is, you can never actually be kind of more extravagant than Pablo anyway. So to bring that aesthetic into the digital space was really fun. Going forward, so that was last week, I think. That's how recent that was. It was last week. Going forward, we've got a couple of other drops. I'm trying to think if I can even mention them. I can't even mention them. So there's two.
That's all right. You can say exciting things are coming nonetheless.
Yeah. Two more collections with known, I guess, players in the physical world, which we're very, very excited about. They're absolutely beautiful. Is all I can say.
Can we expect that 2021, or what's the time scale?
Oh, they're coming soon.
Sooner than
very
that.
Soon, like September. Right. Yeah, very soon.
Okay. But I think that's all we have time for today, even though, as I said last time, there's so many follow-up questions and you can just keep on digging with a subject like this. But thank you so much for your time. It's been a really brilliant conversation, and I'm very excited to find out what this very secretive partnership will be coming out this year.
Oh, keep eyes on our socials. They're really cool. They're really amazing.
Very soon. Yeah. But thank you so much for being on the program, and we will pay attention to you guys as you come along.
Oh, thank you so much for the interview. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Can Design Save Us by the Index Project. I'm your host, Lesley Price, and this episode was produced by Sidsel Nørgaard, with music by Kristina Lilleskov. If you like what we do, make sure to subscribe and tune in next month for a new episode.